The ocean is supposed to return what it takes. Bodies, wreckage, clothing, something. But in the summer of 1985, the Atlantic took a newly married couple and gave nothing back. Not for days, not for months, not for years. And when it finally did return something, 12 years later, it wasn't an answer. It was a warning, a fragment, a reminder that whatever happened out there was never meant to be understood easily. If you're watching this, I want you to do one thing before we continue. Imagine you've just married the love of your life. The wedding photos are still fresh. The cards haven't even been opened yet. And your first journey together is meant to be simple. A cruise. No danger, no risk, just open water and a future. Now imagine that future ends without a single witness. Because this is not just a disappearance, this is one of the most unsettling maritime mysteries of the modern era. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why some investigators quietly admit they never wanted this case reopened. Eleanor and Michael Rowe were married in June of 1985. Friends described them as steady, affectionate, and deeply grounded. They weren't reckless thrill seekers. They didn't gamble. They didn't fight publicly. They didn't talk about starting over somewhere new or vanishing from their lives. They were planners. The kind of couple who kept receipts and wrote thank you notes. Their honeymoon cruise aboard the Sea Voyager was meant to be symbolic. A slow crossing into married life. 7 nights. Caribbean route. Carefully chosen cabin. Everything booked months in advance. On the day they boarded, multiple passengers remembered them clearly. Eleanor wore a light summer dress. Michael carried both bags. They laughed while waiting in line, teasing each other about seasickness. A crew member later remembered Michael asking about sunset views and whether the ship's railings were high enough for photographs. Nothing about them suggested fear. Nothing suggested conflict. Nothing suggested they would not return. The first 2 days passed normally. They attended dinners, they were seen on deck. They signed up for an excursion at the next port. Their key card was used repeatedly. Their presence was documented, mundane, boring. Exactly what you want when you're about to disappear. The last confirmed sighting of Eleanor and Michael Rowe occurred just before midnight on the second night of the voyage. Several passengers recalled seeing them leaning against the railing on an upper deck, Eleanor's head resting against Michael's shoulder. A staff member passed them while conducting a routine check and noticed nothing unusual. That was the last time anyone ever saw them alive. The next morning, the couple did not appear for breakfast. At first, no one was concerned. Honeymooners slept in. That was expected. But when they missed their scheduled excursion briefing later that morning, a crew member was sent to their cabin. There was no response to the knock. Housekeeping attempted entry. The door was locked from the inside. Security was notified. When the door was finally opened, using a master key, the cabin told a story that made no sense. Their luggage was still unpacked. Eleanor's clothing was folded neatly. Michael's shoes were placed side by side near the bed. Their wallets, passports, and wedding gifts were still inside the room. There were no broken items, no overturned furniture, no blood. no sign of a struggle, and no sign that they had ever left. The ship immediately initiated an internal search. Crew members combed every deck, storage area, stairwell, and restricted space. Passengers were questioned quietly to avoid panic. Lifeboats were inspected. Surveillance footage was reviewed. Nothing. No grainy image of them walking off the ship. No blurry silhouette climbing over a railing. No sound of distress. No alarms triggered. The Sea Voyager continued moving forward while panic grew behind the scenes. Eventually, the Coast Guard was notified. A search radius was established based on the ship's route and speed. Helicopters scanned the water. Boats crisscrossed the surface. But searching the ocean is like searching time itself. If you don't know when someone fell in, you don't know where to begin. After 48 hours, the official language changed. The Rows were no longer missing on board. They were presumed overboard. That single phrase would haunt their families for decades. Back home, the news shattered two families at once. Eleanor's parents refused to accept the explanation. Michael's brother flew out to meet the ship at its next port. They demanded answers. They demanded to see footage. They demanded timelines. What they received instead were contradictions. Crew logs showed no unusual activity, but passenger recollections differed slightly. One person thought they heard a noise late at night. Another claimed the ocean seemed rougher than reported. Someone else insisted they saw a man arguing with a woman near the bar, but couldn't identify faces. Every detail created another possibility. Every possibility erased another certainty. As weeks turned into months, the official investigation stalled. Without bodies, without evidence, without witnesses, there was nothing to prosecute and nothing to close. Insurance companies pushed for declarations of death. Families pushed back. Private investigators were hired. Maritime experts were consulted. Ocean current models were analyzed again and again, and still nothing. Years passed. The case drifted into obscurity. Another unsolved maritime disappearance. Another pair of names added to a list no one wanted to read too closely. Until 1997. 12 years after Eleanor and Michael Rowe vanished, a fisherman walking along a remote stretch of shoreline noticed something half buried in wet sand. At first he thought it was trash, a piece of leather worn smooth by salt water. When he picked it up, he realized it was a wallet. Inside was a driver's license. The name read Eleanor Rowe. The discovery sent shockwaves through investigators. The wallet was authenticated. The materials matched what Eleanor was known to carry. The contents were consistent with items she had packed for the trip. The location where it was found made no sense. It was hundreds of miles from where any model suggested debris should surface. Oceanographers disagreed sharply on whether the currents could even carry an object there intact. The wallet showed wear, but not the kind expected after more than a decade at sea. No other items were found. No bones, no clothing, no trace of Michael. Just one object, returned alone. And that's where this case becomes deeply unsettling. Because if Eleanor's wallet did not drift naturally, then someone put it there. If you're still watching, pause for a moment and ask yourself this: what kind of truth waits 12 years before revealing itself? And only partially, because from this point on, every theory only makes the mystery darker, and we're just getting started.
When investigators arrived at the shoreline where Eleanor Rowe's wallet was found, they expected closure, or at least direction. What they found instead was confusion layered on top of grief that had never healed. The beach itself was isolated, rarely visited, the kind of place where objects don't simply wash ashore by accident. There were no nearby shipping lanes, no tourist traffic, no logical reason for a personal item to appear there unless something ordeal or someone, wanted it to be found. The wallet wasn't buried deep. It wasn't tangled in seaweed. It was resting near the high tide line, as if placed deliberately, then lightly covered by sand over time. That detail alone split investigators into opposing camps. Some argued it was coincidence. Others went quiet when asked to explain it, because coincidences don't usually wait 12 years. The contents of the wallet raised even more questions. Cash was still inside. Photographs of Eleanor and Michael, edges softened by moisture but still recognizable. No signs of scavenger damage. No heavy incrustation. Nothing consistent with an object tumbling freely in salt water for more than a decade. And yet, no forensic test could definitively prove it hadn't. That uncertainty became the foundation of every theory that followed. Oceanographers were brought in to recreate possible drift patterns. Using historical data from 1985 onward, they modeled currents, storms, and seasonal shifts. Most concluded the wallet could not have traveled naturally to that beach from the ship's route. A minority argued it could, but only under extremely rare conditions, involving multiple current reversals and long-term suspension. In other words, possible on paper, unlikely in reality. And then there was the timing. Why 12 years? Why not 1 year? 5? Why wait until memories faded, witnesses died, and the case lost momentum? Unless the timing wasn't about the ocean at all. Unless someone had held on to it. That idea reopened wounds the families had been trying to seal shut for years. Eleanor's mother reportedly broke down when informed of the discovery. Michael's brother demanded the investigation be reopened fully, insisting the wallet was proof that their disappearance was not an accident. Authorities agreed to review the case, but reviewing and solving are very different things. They went back to the ship. Old maintenance logs were pulled from storage, crew rosters were examined again. One name stood out: a crew member who left the company shortly after the voyage and could not be located years later. At the time, his departure meant nothing. Staff turnover was common. But now everything was suspect. Passengers were re-interviewed where possible. Many had forgotten details. Some had passed away. Others admitted they'd always felt something was off, but didn't know how to explain it. One woman recalled hearing what she described as muffled shouting late at night, not loud enough to alarm anyone, but unusual. Another remembered seeing Eleanor alone earlier that evening, her expression distant, troubled. That memory contradicted earlier statements where Eleanor was described as happy and relaxed. Memory is unreliable, but patterns aren't. Investigators began to question whether the locked cabin told the truth everyone assumed it did. A door locked from the inside suggests suicide or accident, but maritime experts pointed out something few had considered. In 1985, certain master keys and internal mechanisms could lock a cabin after exit under specific conditions. It wasn't common, but it wasn't impossible. That realization quietly shifted the narrative. If someone else had been in that cabin, if someone else had left it, then Eleanor and Michael didn't vanish into the ocean on their own. They were taken there or removed. At this point, I want you to pause and think about how many true crime stories hinge on one assumption that goes unchallenged for years: a locked door, a timeline, a belief that something couldn't have happened. This case is a masterclass in what happens when no one questions the foundation. As investigators dug deeper, another disturbing possibility surfaced, one that cruise lines rarely want discussed publicly. People do disappear at sea, more often than you think, and not all of them fall. Internal documents from the era revealed that reporting standards for onboard incidents were inconsistent at best. Jurisdiction at sea is complicated. Responsibility shifts between countries, companies, and maritime law. In 1985, oversight was even looser. If something happened to Eleanor and Michael aboard that ship, it could have been buried, intentionally or not, beneath bureaucracy and silence. But that still didn't explain the wallet. Someone knew where it was. Someone chose when to let it go. Years after the discovery, a former dock worker came forward anonymously claiming he'd overheard a conversation in the late 80s about a couple on a cruise that went wrong. The statement was vague. No names, no proof. But the implication was chilling. When pressed, he recanted. Fear has a way of erasing testimony. So does time. The investigation stalled again. The wallet was archived. The case returned to limbo. But among independent researchers and online forums, the story refused to die. Armchair detectives mapped routes, compared cases, dug up similar disappearances involving newlyweds, couples, and closed-door cabins. A pattern began to emerge, not definitive but unsettling. Couples disappearing together are statistically rare. When they do, it often involves violence, conflict, or third-party involvement. Accidental falls typically involve individuals, not pairs. Suicide pacts leave evidence, struggles leave marks. Eleanor and Michael left nothing, except a question, and a single object returned by the sea, or by something far more deliberate. Before we continue, let me ask you something directly. If you found an object tied to a cold case, would you turn it in immediately? Or would you wait until you felt safe? Because in the next part, we're going to explore the theories investigators don't like to discuss publicly, including one scenario that, if true, explains everything and implicates far more than one person. By the time independent investigators began comparing Eleanor and Michael's disappearance to other cases, something deeply uncomfortable started to take shape. Not a single dramatic revelation, not a smoking gun, but a pattern that felt too precise to ignore once you saw it. Throughout the late 1970s and 1980s, multiple cruise ships reported incidents that were quietly categorized as accidents, misunderstandings, or voluntary actions. People overboard, people missing, cabins locked, timelines fuzzy, jurisdiction blurred. And in nearly every case, the conclusion came quickly, faster than the questions. What made the Rowe case
different wasn't just that they disappeared together. It was that nothing about their behavior suggested risk. Michael wasn't drinking heavily. Eleanor wasn't depressed. There were no arguments reported, no financial issues, no letters, no phone calls home expressing concern. Their lives were just beginning, and yet they vanished in a way that looked clean, too clean. As scrutiny intensified, investigators revisited the layout of the Sea Voyager. Deck maps were examined, sightlines recreated. It became clear that certain areas of the ship, particularly service corridors and crew-only stairwells, were not covered by cameras in 1985. If someone wanted to move unseen, they could. If someone wanted to avoid passengers, they could. And if someone wanted to make a disappearance look accidental, the ocean was the perfect accomplice. Former crew members contacted years later were hesitant to speak. Some refused outright, others spoke only off the record. A few admitted that there were things passengers didn't see: disputes, altercations, improvised fixes when systems failed. One former steward made a chilling comment: "If something happened late at night and no one important saw it, it would just disappear." When pressed to explain what he meant, he ended the call. That silence said more than any confession. Another angle began to trouble investigators: the idea that Eleanor and Michael might not have been targeted at all, that they might have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, that they witnessed something they shouldn't have. Illegal activity at sea is not rare. Smuggling, theft, unreported assaults. The ocean provides isolation and plausible deniability. If a confrontation occurred, if panic escalated, 2 lives could be lost in minutes and then covered up in hours. Still, no theory explained the wallet. So let's talk about the wallet. For 12 years, it existed somewhere, dry enough to preserve photos, protected enough to remain intact. And then, suddenly, it appeared in a place where discovery was almost guaranteed. That suggests intention. Which brings us to the most disturbing theory associated with this case, one investigators never officially endorsed but never fully dismissed either. What if someone tried to undo what they'd done? What if guilt didn't arrive immediately but years later? Psychologists studying delayed confessions often point out that guilt doesn't always surface when danger is highest. It surfaces when life slows down, when retirement begins, when illness strikes, when the people who could punish you are gone. 12 years is not an arbitrary number. It's enough time for careers to end, for companies to change hands, for witnesses to scatter, for memories to soften. If someone wanted to return a piece of evidence without returning themselves, placing the wallet on a remote shore would be a way to speak without speaking, a way to say they're gone, but they mattered. Now here's where things become even more unsettling. The wallet was never tested for DNA beyond Eleanor's. At the time, forensic methods were limited. Today, they are not. Yet, requests to re-examine the item using modern techniques have repeatedly been denied or stalled. No clear explanation, just delays. That raises a question no one likes to ask. Who benefits
from this case staying unresolved. Cruise lines certainly do. A solved case involving foul play on board would be catastrophic for public trust. Governments benefit from avoiding jurisdictional conflict. Individuals benefit from anonymity, but families benefit from truth. And they never got it. One private investigator working the case unofficially claimed that the Rowe's cabin location was inconveniently close to a crew passageway. Another claimed a maintenance issue had been logged near that area on the night of their disappearance. Well, a detail never emphasized in early reports. None of this was enough to reopen the case formally, but it was enough to keep doubt alive. If you're still watching, ask yourself this: how many disappearances are truly accidents? And how many are simply labeled that way because it's easier? Because the ocean doesn't argue back. The final theory we need to confront is the hardest one: the possibility that Eleanor and Michael never went overboard at all, that they died somewhere else, that their bodies never entered the water near the ship, that the ocean wasn't the crime scene, it was the alibi. If that's true, then everything changes. The search radius was wrong, the timeline was wrong, the assumptions were wrong from the beginning. And the wallet wasn't a clue. It was a correction. In the final part, we're going to walk through what that scenario would actually require, why it's terrifyingly plausible, and why, even now, some people insist the truth is still out there, waiting to be found. If this story has you questioning everything you thought you knew about disappearances at sea, let me know you're still with me. If Eleanor and Michael Rowe did not go overboard that night, then the story everyone accepted for decades collapses under its own weight. And what replaces it is far more disturbing than an accident in the dark. To understand how this could have happened, you have to understand something fundamental about ships like the Sea Voyager in 1985. They were floating cities, yes, but they were also layered environments. What passengers saw was comfort, music, lights, and laughter. What they didn't see were service decks, storage areas, maintenance shafts, and controlled access spaces where cameras were rare or non-existent. If something went wrong in those spaces, it could stay there. Investigators who later studied the ship's original schematics noticed something subtle but critical. The Rowe's cabin was positioned near a vertical service corridor that connected multiple decks. It was intended for crew use only, a quick route for supplies and maintenance. Passengers weren't supposed to use it, but nothing physically prevented them from entering, especially at night. If Eleanor or Michael stepped into that corridor, even briefly, they would have been invisible to other passengers almost instantly. That corridor changed everything, because if there was an argument, an accident, or a confrontation there, the outcome would not have been witnessed. And if someone panicked afterward, the ship itself provided the means to hide what happened next. This is the part of the story where theories stop sounding speculative and start sounding operational. Consider this. If two people died on board, unintentionally or otherwise, the worst possible outcome for everyone involved would be discovery, panic, delays, investigations, international scrutiny, careers destroyed, criminal charges spanning jurisdictions. But if the incident could be reframed as an accident at sea, then there would be no crime scene, no bodies, no clear suspects. Just water. That's not an accusation. It's a structural reality of maritime law, and in 1985 it was exploited more often than anyone wants to admit. Former maritime officials have acknowledged that man overboard cases were frequently resolved quickly to avoid complications. Once someone was presumed lost at sea, the burden of proof shifted away from the vessel. Now add one more factor. Eleanor and Michael were newlyweds, emotionally attached, likely to stay together no matter what happened. If one of them was injured, the other would not leave. That detail alone explains why neither ever reappeared, but it still doesn't explain the wallet. So let's address the final, most chilling possibility. What if the wallet was never lost at sea at all? What if it remained on board by you or with someone on board for years? Personal items don't vanish easily. Crew members clean cabins thoroughly. Anything left behind is cataloged, stored, logged, or quietly discarded unless someone intervenes. If someone took Eleanor's wallet that night, intentionally or not, it could have stayed with them long after the voyage ended, through job changes, through moves, through years of silence, until guilt set in, or fear, or the realization that holding onto it was more dangerous than letting it go. Placing it on a remote shoreline accomplishes several things at once. It creates the illusion of ocean drift. It provides families with a fragment of closure, and it prevents forensic certainty. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no timeline, just ambiguity. And ambiguity protects the living. Years after the wallet's discovery, one investigator made a comment that never appeared in any official report. He said, "This case doesn't feel unsolved. It feels unfinished, like someone stopped talking." That statement captures the essence of what makes the Rowe disappearance so unsettling. There is no explosion of evidence waiting to be uncovered, no dramatic confession looming, just a quiet gap where answers should be. Eleanor and Michael Rowe went on a honeymoon and never came back. Not because they wanted to disappear, not because the ocean claimed them randomly, but because something happened that night that no one was prepared to explain. And the system chose silence. If you've stayed with this story until now, you understand something most people don't. The scariest mysteries aren't the ones with monsters or conspiracies. They're the ones where normal systems fail quietly, and everyone moves on, except the families, except the truth. Somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened on the Sea Voyager in 1985. They've known it for decades, and every year that passes makes it easier for that knowledge to die with them, unless stories like this are told. Unless people keep asking questions, unless silence becomes uncomfortable. If you believe Eleanor and Michael deserve more than a footnote, more than a theory, more than a shrug toward the sea, make that known. Because the ocean may keep secrets, but people don't forever. And this story is not over.